This is an insult to cuisine. Unrefined, unsophisticated, utterly primitive. Chef Antoine Dubois' voice boomed, shattering the kitchen's rhythm. He swept a meticulously plated dish from the pass, sending ceramic and artful components crashing. Elias Thorne stood silently, his gaze steady, absorbing the public shaming without a flinch. What would you do if someone dismissed your expertise, not by the quality of your craft, but by their preconceived notions of who you should be? In a world obsessed with titles and appearances, true genius often hides in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. This was the Gilded Spoon, a temple of haute cuisine where every dish was a masterpiece and every reservation a coveted prize. Located in the heart of the city, its reputation for exquisite flavors and impeccable service was legendary. Tonight, as crystal chandeliers shimmered over hushed, expectant diners, the stage was set for an unexpected reckoning. Amidst the controlled chaos of the Gilded Spoon's kitchen, Chef Elias Thorne moved with the quiet grace of a maestro. At 36, his hands, calloused from years of dedicated craft, meticulously reduced a demi-glace, coaxing layers of flavor from rich bone stock. Sous Chef Anya Sharma watched, admiring his focused intensity. "Chef Thorne, order for table 7, almost ready," she announced, her voice respectful. Elias merely nodded, his eyes never leaving the simmering pot, a silent testament to his profound connection to the food. Elias believed in honest cooking, a patient, respectful dialogue between ingredients and tradition. He eschewed fleeting trends, preferring timeless techniques that built depth and soul into every plate. Observing a junior chef rush a reduction, Elias gently corrected. "Flavor, young one, is not hurried." His philosophy permeated the kitchen, a quiet force against the clamor for instant gratification and superficial dazzle. But Elias Thorne wasn't just another talented chef. His journey had been a deliberate choice, a path carefully carved away from the glare of celebrity. Years ago, Elias had stood on the precipice of culinary fame, a prodigious talent whose innovative dishes had turned heads at international competitions. He'd had opportunities for TV shows, cookbooks, his own string of Michelin-starred restaurants. Yet, he'd quietly declined them all. His passion wasn't for the spotlight, but for the plate. For the honest alchemy of ingredients and heat, unburdened by ego or public spectacle. He had chosen the quiet dedication to his craft over the fleeting applause of the masses. Now, a very different kind of chef was set to descend upon the Gilded Spoon. Chef Antoine Dubois. His name was plastered across glossy magazine covers, his face a familiar sight on primetime cooking shows. Antoine was a whirlwind of theatrical flair and calculated charm, a culinary showman whose celebrity status often overshadowed his actual skill. He wore his chef's whites like a general's uniform, impeccably tailored, gleaming with embroidered accolades. Antoine's confidence didn't just border on arrogance, it built towering monuments to it, visible in every sweeping gesture, every booming pronouncement. He was a force, and his arrival always promised drama. Antoine Dubois ran his kitchens like personal kingdoms. His staff, often young and ambitious, lived in perpetual fear of his razor-sharp critiques and public humiliations. He'd bark orders, dismiss observations, and make every chef, from commis to sous, feel utterly insignificant if they dared to question his supreme authority. "My kitchen, my rules," he'd often snarl. The staff at the Gilded Spoon, even the veterans, exchanged nervous glances. Anya, Elias's sous chef, wrung her hands. "He's going to be impossible," she muttered to a junior chef, who flinched at the thought. The air thickened with apprehension, a silent dread anticipating the impending storm. In Antoine's world, hierarchy was everything. Chefs were not simply colleagues. They existed on a rigid ladder of prestige and power. And in his mind, anyone not at the very top, especially those who favored traditional, unsophisticated methods, were at the bottom. Elias, in his unassuming chef's whites, often blended into the background, a quiet craftsman rather than a flamboyant artist. Anya looked at Elias, a subtle worry etched on her face. "Chef?" she began, her voice low. "Perhaps tonight. Perhaps we should be more conventional." Elias simply met her gaze, a calm, knowing look in his eyes that spoke volumes without a single word. What Antoine Dubois didn't know, what no one outside a select few understood, was that his visit was not merely a casual stop. Tucked away in the restaurant owner's private office, a discreet, official-looking letter lay on a polished mahogany desk. Its heavy paper and prestigious seal hinted at an upcoming, quote, assessment, a quiet, incognito evaluation of the Gilded Spoon. The stakes were far higher than Antoine's ego. A Michelin star hung in the balance, unbeknownst to the celebrity chef whose arrival was about to shake the very foundations of the kitchen. The stage was set, and the players, both seen and unseen, were in position. The Gilded Spoon kitchen pulsed with a controlled frenzy. At 7 p.m., dinner service was a symphony of precision and heat. Flames danced from stovetops, steam billowed from simmering pots, and the rhythmic clatter of pans blended with the sharp, efficient calls of the cooks. Amidst the organized chaos, Chef Elias Thorne moved with a quiet, almost meditative grace. His deep-set eyes missed nothing, his presence a calming anchor in the storm. "Risotto, 5 minutes," he murmured, a soft command that carried authority without raising his voice. Anya Sharma, his sous chef, watched him, a silent admiration in her gaze as she plated a delicate scallop dish. Every movement, every instruction from Elias, was a testament to years of practiced mastery. Precisely at 7:30 p.m., the restaurant's entrance doors swung open, admitting a figure who commanded attention. Chef Antoine Dubois, a force of nature in an impeccably tailored chef's coat, strode through the opulent dining room. His expensive watch glinted under the chandeliers as he offered curt, dismissive nods to the deferential restaurant manager. Antoine wasn't here for pleasantries. He was here to survey his domain, or at least what he considered his rightful sphere of influence. He pushed through the swinging kitchen doors, and the vibrant hum of the service seemed to falter, a collective intake of breath among the staff. The air thickened, charged with the arrival of a predator. Antoine surveyed the kitchen, his gaze sweeping over the anxious faces of the junior chefs. He spotted Elias at the pass section, meticulously garnishing a plate. Without breaking stride, Antoine gestured with a dismissive flick of his wrist. "You there," he called out, his voice carrying a condescending edge. "Fetch me a fresh towel. And make it quick, boy." Elias paused, his hands still, his calm eyes meeting Antoine's. He said nothing. No protest, no correction. He simply nodded once, a subtle inclination of his head that could be read as deference or quiet observation, and moved to retrieve the towel. Anya, nearby, winced, her loyalty warring with her apprehension. Antoine, having received his towel, resumed his critical inspection. He stopped at a plating station, scrutinizing a classic coq au vin, its rich, earthy tones, a stark contrast to the modern minimalist cuisine he championed. "Rustic," he scoffed, his lips curling slightly. "Far too simple. We are at the Gilded Spoon, not a country bistro. Where is the innovation? The refinement?" He gestured dismissively at the perfectly braised chicken. Elias, still working on his own intricate dish, continued his task, his movements unhurried. Antoine's words, though clearly intended as veiled insults, seemed to roll off him, leaving his concentration unwavering. He knew the value of honest cooking. At 8:30 p.m., Antoine's critical gaze landed on Elias's station. Elias was adding a final delicate touch to a complex seafood creation, a whisper of smoked paprika, infused into a delicate foam. Antoine leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "Ah, the smoke and mirrors. Approach," he sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He tapped a finger against the plate. "Paprika foam? In a dish of this supposed caliber? It's unsophisticated, chef. A fundamental mistake that betrays a lack of true understanding of modern culinary balance. It's a peasant's spice, not fit for a Michelin-level establishment." Elias slowly straightened, meeting Antoine's sneering expression with a calm, unyielding gaze. The air around them crackled with antagonism. Antoine, sensing the attention of the now-frozen kitchen staff, puffed out his chest. This was his stage, and Elias Thorne, the quiet chef in simple whites, was his unwitting co-star. He took a dramatic step back, positioning himself centrally, arms akimbo. The clatter of pans ceased entirely. The hiss of steam seemed to hold its breath. Staff members exchanged nervous glances. their eyes darting between Antoine's looming figure and Elias's resolute posture. A collective dread settled over the kitchen. They knew this ritual. They'd seen Antoine perform it before. Elias, though outwardly calm, took a slow, deep breath. His quiet, steady rhythm, the only sound daring to defy the impending explosion. "Let me be perfectly clear," Antoine began, his voice booming through the suddenly silent kitchen. "The Gilded Spoon prides itself on a certain standard, a certain ne sais quoi that elevates it above the mundane. And yet I see techniques here that are, frankly, an embarrassment to the art of haute cuisine." He gestured wildly towards Elias's finished dish. This creation before me lacks finesse, lacks foresight, lacks the very sophistication required to grace these plates. It's an insult to the palate." Elias maintained unwavering eye contact, his expression unreadable, even as Anya Sharma covered her mouth with a worried hand, her eyes wide with apprehension. The confrontation had begun. "This," Antoine Dubois declared, his voice echoing with theatrical disdain as he gestured dramatically at the perfectly prepared dish Elias had just finished, "is simply pedestrian. Where is the asterisk innovation job? The flair? You call this the pinnacle of fine dining? It smacks of simple tastes, a lack of refinement that, frankly, I find concerning for an establishment of this caliber." He sneered, a glint of genuine contempt in his eyes as he looked at Elias. The head chef's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, his eyes hardening, but he remained silent, his gaze steady. The kitchen staff, frozen in their positions, looked down at their stations, avoiding eye contact, willing themselves to be invisible. Anya Sharma, watching from a few feet away, clenched her fists. Her gaze flickered from Antoine's sneering face to Elias's stoic profile, a silent offer of intervention, a frustrated plea. Elias caught her eye, a brief, almost imperceptible nod, a subtle shake of his head. Asterisk. "Not yet," the gesture communicated. "Hold your peace." Anya's shoulders slumped slightly, but she understood. The silent exchange of understanding passed between them. A small act of defiance in the face of Antoine's grandstanding. A quiet loyalty that ran deeper than any celebrity chef's bluster. Antoine, feeling his power unchallenged, puffed out his chest. "Listen here," he continued, his voice dropping to a harsh, condescending whisper that still carried through the suddenly silent kitchen. "In a kitchen of this stature, we have a clear chain of command. There are those who create, and those who merely follow. You don't question the master chef just as a junior cook doesn't presume to dictate the menu to a seasoned veteran." He wagged a finger dismissively in Elias's direction. "Your job is to execute, not to innovate with rustic methods that belong in a provincial bistro, not the Gilded Spoon." Elias's expression remained unreadable, a mask of calm, but the resolve in his eyes was clear, a silent challenge that Antoine was too arrogant to perceive. The staff collectively shrank back, uncomfortable witnesses to the public shaming. Antoine leaned in closer, his voice laced with venom. "Frankly, I don't know what kind of culinary school you attended. Or perhaps it was no school at all. But around here, we deal in sophistication, in art, not whatever this honest cooking you champion is supposed to be. If you can't grasp that, perhaps you're in the wrong profession, or certainly the wrong kitchen for such unsophisticated palates." Elias's controlled fury flashed in his eyes, a brief, intense spark. His hands, usually in constant motion, were still, resting lightly on the cool steel of his prep table. At that exact moment, unnoticed by the self-absorbed Antoine, the heavy oak door leading from the dining room into the kitchen began to slowly swing open. "Chef Dubois," Elias said, his voice calm, clear, and firm, cutting through Antoine's lingering sneer like a precise knife. It was a subtle tone, almost a warning, carrying an understated authority that Antoine, blinded by his own ego, completely missed. "I strongly advise you to reconsider your judgment of this kitchen's approach to cuisine." Antoine laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that grated in the sterile air. "You advise me? That's rich! The only advice I need from you is how to properly scrub a pot." The kitchen staff exchanged shocked glances, their eyes wide. Elias held Antoine's gaze. a steady, knowing look that promised a reckoning. But Antoine was too busy preening to notice. The camera subtly shifted to the dining room, focusing on the figure of a new diner, impeccably dressed, taking a seat at a discreet corner table. What if the person holding the fate of your entire establishment was sitting just out of sight, observing every detail, every flaw, every triumph, while chaos erupted behind the scenes? It was 9:15 p.m. in the opulent dining room of the Gilded Spoon. The low hum of polite conversation, the clinking of crystal, and the soft strains of a jazz trio created a symphony of refined luxury. Into this elegant tableau stepped Monsieur Jean-Luc Moreau. He was not a man who commanded attention with a loud entrance, but rather with an almost invisible grace. His impeccably tailored charcoal suit, a simple silk tie, and a quiet confidence allowed him to blend seamlessly. Just another discerning diner. He moved to his table, a small, discreet corner booth, and settled in. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, immediately began their work, sweeping over the room, assessing the lighting, the floral arrangements, the attentiveness of the waitstaff. Tucked into his inner jacket pocket was a small, leather-bound notebook, a silent arbiter of culinary destiny. The true test of a restaurant, Jean-Luc believed, began long before the food touched the palate. It was in the seamless flow of service, the unspoken understanding between guest and host, the anticipation built by impeccable presentation. A young waiter, attentive and poised, approached his table. "Good evening, Monsieur Moreau. Welcome to the Gilded Spoon. May I offer you our aperitif menu?" Jean-Luc offered a small, appreciative smile. "Thank you, young man. A glass of the Brut champagne, if you please." He noted the waiter's confident posture, the precise way he placed the menu, the respectful eye contact. A subtle nod of approval, almost imperceptible, was his only outward sign of satisfaction. Moments later, an appetizer arrived, a delicate scallop ceviche, meticulously arranged, a miniature work of art. The vibrant colors and fresh aroma were a promising prelude to the evening's culinary journey. As Jean-Luc savored the delicate balance of flavors, his senses remained acutely aware of his surroundings. A subtle shift in the restaurant's ambient hum caught his attention. A faint, almost imperceptible clamor seemed to emanate from the kitchen, a momentary disruption to the otherwise serene atmosphere. It wasn't loud enough to disturb the diners, but it was a distinct departure from the usual controlled chaos of a high-end kitchen. He paused, a slight frown creasing his brow as his gaze flickered towards the closed kitchen doors. Was it simply the natural pressure of a busy service? He dismissed the thought, attributing it to the passion that often simmered in such creative spaces. Yet, his mind, a meticulous catalogue of observations, filed away the anomaly, a tiny imperfection noted in the grand tapestry of the evening. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Antoine Dubois' indignation had reached a fever pitch, his voice slicing through the clatter of pans. This primitive ingredient, quote, he roared, dramatically plucking a perfectly charred heirloom carrot from a meticulously composed plate Elias had prepared, tossing it into a nearby bin with a theatrical flourish. "Chef Thorne, you call this modern cuisine? This is what one might find in a country tavern, not a Michelin-contending establishment." He gestured wildly with his hands, his face flushed with a furious passion. "We are pushing boundaries here, elevating palates, not catering to simple, unsophisticated tastes. This is not just a mistake, it is an insult to the very concept of haute cuisine. You must understand that in a kitchen of this caliber, adherence to refined standards is paramount." Elias stood unmoving, his gaze fixed on Antoine, his face a mask of quiet resolve. The kitchen staff, frozen in place, flinched collectively with each of Antoine's scathing pronouncements, their eyes darting between the two chefs. Back in the dining room, Jean-Luc Moreau finished his main course, a perfectly seared duck breast with a cherry reduction, a dish he recognized as a signature of the Gilded Spoon's innovative yet classic approach. A subtle smile played on his lips. The execution was flawless, the flavors profound and complex, speaking of a deep understanding of ingredients and technique. This was not mere cooking, this was artistry. He leaned back, a satisfied sigh escaping him. The talent at work in this kitchen was undeniable, a testament to true mastery. A thought solidified in his mind. Such exceptional quality warranted a personal commendation. he decided then and there to make an unannounced visit to the kitchen. With a decisive movement, Jean-Luc pushed back his chair, his eyes now fixed on the kitchen doors, a keen observer ready to become an active participant. "And this," Antoine spat, gesturing wildly at Elias's half-finished dish, "this uninspired concoction, it speaks volumes. It speaks of a limited perspective, a palate perhaps too rooted in the provincial, too accustomed to the simple flavors of a, shall we say, less refined heritage. It's not just unsophisticated, chef, it's primitive." His voice dripped with disdain, each word a calculated jab, not just at the food, but at Elias's very being. Elias Thorne stood his ground, a deep, controlled breath expanding his chest, but his eyes, usually calm pools of focus, now burned with an unspoken fire. Anya, watching from a distance, instinctively covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Just as the words hung heavy, a sliver of light appeared as the kitchen's heavy service door began to slowly swing inward. "You see, into my kitchens," Antoine continued, oblivious, puffing out his chest, "we elevate, we transcend, we don't just cook, we create an experience. And what you're doing here, chef, is an insult to the very art form we dedicate our lives to. It's a disgrace to the Gilded Spoon and to... He paused, searching for a suitably grandiose final word, his back still squarely to the opening door. Monsieur Jean-Luc Moreau stepped silently into the bustling kitchen, his presence initially swallowed by Antoine's booming monologue and the residual clatter of service. He moved with the quiet grace of a seasoned observer, his gaze sweeping over the scene, an unacknowledged arbiter entering a performance he was never meant to be a part of. Anya was the first to see him, a sharp gasp escaping her lips, quickly stifled. Then, one by one, the other kitchen staff, who had been frozen in their stations, their eyes wide with apprehension, slowly turned. Their movements were subtle, almost imperceptible, but the shift in their collective attention was palpable. The vibrant hum of the kitchen, which had been a low thrum beneath Antoine's rant, died an abrupt, unnatural death. Antoine's voice, mid-sentence, faltered. He heard the sudden, unnerving silence, felt the weight of the kitchen's collective gaze shift from him, and paused, confused. He peered over Elias's shoulder, then slowly, reluctantly, turned. Confusion gave way to a dawning horror as his eyes landed on the composed figure standing just inside the entrance. Monsieur Jean-Luc Moreau stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture radiating an understated authority that dwarfed Antoine's theatrical bluster. His gaze, sharp and piercing, met Antoine's. There was no judgment, no anger, just a profound, unreadable assessment. Antoine Dubois' face, moments ago flushed with rage, cycled through confusion, then a flicker of recognition, and finally, a chilling fear. The meticulously embroidered Michelin Guide logo on Jean-Luc's pocket square seemed to catch the harsh kitchen lights, a silent, damning indictment. Antoine's jaw went slack, his bravado utterly evaporated by the weight of that unwavering gaze. Jean-Luc's eyes held Antoine's for another agonizing second, then, with a subtle shift, moved past him. He didn't acknowledge Antoine with a word, or even a nod. His gaze swept over the stunned kitchen, past the cowering junior chefs, searching. It was a silent, deliberate search, like a conductor seeking his true maestro in a chaotic orchestra. His eyes landed on Elias Thorne, who stood calmly at his station, his composure still unbroken, though a faint, knowing glint now resided in his eyes. Without hesitation, Jean-Luc Moreau began to walk, his steps measured and purposeful, directly towards Elias. The entire kitchen was frozen, the hum of the extractor fans the only sound. Antoine Dubois, mid-tirade, had faltered, sensing the shift in the room. His eyes, still blazing with self-righteous anger, darted around, trying to find the source of the sudden, unsettling silence. That's when Monsieur Jean-Luc Moreau, who had calmly stepped into the bustling space, extended a hand, not to Antoine, but past him, towards Elias Thorne. A confident, knowing smile played on Jean-Luc's lips. "Chef Thorne," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of true discernment. "A true pleasure. Your cooking is simply exquisite." The words hung in the air, shattering the tense silence like crystal. Antoine's jaw dropped, a sickeningly loud clatter echoing as a serving spoon slipped from a junior chef's trembling hand and hit the stainless steel floor. Elias, calm as ever, met Jean-Luc's gaze and offered a slight, acknowledging nod. Antoine Dubois' face cycled through a kaleidoscope of emotions: confusion, disbelief, then a dawning horror. He stammered, pointing a trembling finger at Elias. That's impossible. He's in simple whites. He's the line cook, the asterisk Camille. Monsieur Jean-Luc Moreau turned his piercing gaze towards Antoine, a single, disapproving eyebrow arching. There was no need for words. The Michelin inspector's look was a silent, scathing judgment. Antoine, for the first time in his celebrated career, found himself utterly speechless, his theatrical bluster deflating like a pricked balloon. He looked from Elias, serene and composed, to Jean-Luc, whose quiet authority was absolute, and then back to Elias, his eyes wide with a desperate, pathetic confusion. Elias Thorne remained unruffled by Antoine's sputtering. He gently turned his body, allowing the subtle, elegant embroidery on his crisp, plain chef's whites to catch the light. A discreet, E. Thorne, head chef. It wasn't a flashy badge, but the proof was undeniable, quiet and resolute. "I find," Elias stated, his voice calm and clear, cutting through Antoine's stunned silence, "that removing the fanfare allows me to stay connected to the true essence of the food, to the ingredients themselves. It helps me focus on the craft, not the spectacle." Around the kitchen, Anya Sharma's eyes welled with pride, and the other staff members exchanged knowing, vindicated glances. Antoine's already pale face drained further, the weight of his assumption pressing down on him. Elias turned his steady gaze back to Antoine, who stood frozen, utterly humiliated. There was no anger in Elias's voice, only a quiet, undeniable truth. "True quality," he said, his words resonating with the very soul of the kitchen, "speaks for itself, regardless of the uniform, the fame, or the presumed status. It is in the dish, in the taste, in the passion, and the respect for the ingredients." Antoine Dubois could only gape, his mouth opening and closing without a sound. Every cutting remark, every dismissive gesture, every prejudiced assumption he had made, now echoed back, magnified by the profound silence of the kitchen. Monsieur Jean-Luc Moreau offered Elias a small, approving nod, a silent acknowledgement of the deeper lesson being imparted. With the lesson delivered, Elias Thorne turned his attention back to the bustling service, the crisis averted. "Anya, the consommé needs a final tasting. Chef David, your scallops are ready for plating." His commands were crisp, authoritative, and instantly obeyed. The kitchen, which moments ago had been gripped by a stunned silence, sprang back to life with renewed vigor, the staff moving with a heightened sense of purpose and pride under their true leader. Monsieur Jean-Luc Moreau observed the seamless transition, a faint, satisfied smile on his face, clearly impressed by Elias's composure and the immediate, respectful response of his team. Antoine Dubois, however, remained rooted to the spot, a solitary, humiliated figure, suddenly invisible amidst the focused energy of a kitchen that had found its true maestro. The last order ticket had been spiked, the final dish plated and sent. The Gilded Spoon kitchen, usually a whirlwind of controlled chaos, now hummed with the quiet clatter of cleaning. Anya Sharma approached Elias, her shoulders visibly lighter than they had been hours before. A small, sincere smile touched her lips. "Chef Thorne," she began, her voice soft but firm, "I just thank you for standing your ground." She paused, glancing around the now nearly empty kitchen. "Chef Dubois, he's dismissed so many good people over the years, made them feel small. You didn't let him." Elias met her gaze, a gentle nod acknowledging her words. "Anya," he replied, his voice calm. "The food speaks for itself, always, and true talent, it cannot be silenced." His quiet assurance was a balm, a shared victory in the aftermath of a public challenge. The camaraderie between them, forged in silent witness, was palpable. The following morning, the crisp scent of lemon polish filled the private office of the Gilded Spoon's owner. Antoine Dubois sat slumped in a plush leather chair, his impeccably tailored suit now seeming to sag. Across from him, the owner, Mr. Laurent, held a discreetly folded note. Monsieur Dubois, Laurent began, his tone cold and devoid of his usual deference. Monsieur Moreau's report arrived this morning. He expressed considerable disappointment in your conduct. Specifically, your public berating of my head chef, Elias Thorne, and your dismissal of his culinary judgment. Antoine stammered, his face pale. But he was just a chef in scrubs. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know he was the maestro? Laurent cut him off, his gaze unwavering. Your behavior, Antoine, would have been unacceptable regardless of Chef Thorne's position. You questioned his expertise based on appearance, and you created a hostile environment in my kitchen. That, Monsieur Dubois, is a taste I will not tolerate. The formal letter on the desk, a termination notice, served as a stark, undeniable dessert. A week later, the Gilded Spoon kitchen vibrated with a different kind of energy. Elias Thorne moved through his domain no longer just a respected figure, but one revered. Junior chefs approached him with questions, their deference now laced with genuine admiration. Chef Thorne, that technique with the confit truly brilliant, one young chef offered, a newfound respect shining in his eyes. Elias offered a humble smile, his focus still on the perfectly balanced sauces. The news had spread like wildfire through the culinary world. The Gilded Spoon had not only retained its star, but had been awarded a second Michelin star. The official announcement praised its unpretentious brilliance and masterful execution of classic techniques with a soulful, modern touch. Elias Thorne's name, once a quiet murmur among connoisseurs, was now shouted from every reputable culinary blog and newspaper. Anya watched him, a profound sense of pride swelling in her chest. He hadn't just earned a star, he'd earned a new chapter of respect for every chef who valued substance over show. Meanwhile, the public persona of Chef Antoine Dubois began to unravel. His once confident appearances on morning talk shows were now awkward, marked by hesitant apologies and forced smiles. Social media, a platform he had once dominated, buzzed with the story of his public humiliation. Hashtags like #ChefThorne and #TasteOvertitle trended, overshadowing any mention of his latest cookbook. During a televised interview asked about the incident, Antoine shifted uncomfortably. I made a mistake, he mumbled, his theatrical voice now subdued. I misjudged the situation. The usual sparkle in his eye was gone, replaced by a guarded, almost wary expression. The public, once enamored with his bombast, now saw through the cracks, recognizing the arrogance that had been disguised as confidence. His once loyal fans, subtle shakes of their heads, began to look for new culinary heroes. The tour of self-promotion had become a tour of public penance. In the quiet moments after a particularly successful service, Elias Thorne stood at his station, his hands resting on the well-worn cutting board. He looked down at his simple, embroidered chef's whites, the fabric a testament to countless hours spent in dedication to his craft. He recalled Antoine's sneering remarks, the dismissal of his unsophisticated style, and the assumption that a chef in plain whites couldn't possibly be a master. A calm, knowing smile touched his lips. It wasn't about the grandeur of the uniform or the volume of the pronouncements. It was about the integrity of the ingredients, the precision of the technique, the love infused into every dish. True quality, he reflected, always finds its way to the palate. It speaks a universal language, heard by those who truly listen. He had never sought the spotlight, but by simply being himself, he had shone brighter than any celebrity chef could ever hope to. Elias Thorne's story, a tale simmering within the hallowed walls of the Gilded Spoon, is more than just a culinary triumph. It's a universal truth, served with precision and undeniable flavor. In a world too often quick to judge by the color of one's skin, the simplicity of one's attire, or the perceived sophistication of one's background, we are reminded of the profound danger of assumptions. Expertise, wisdom, and genuine mastery can bloom in the most unexpected places, often hidden beneath an unassuming exterior. Just as Monsieur Moreau recognized the true artistry in Elias's dishes, unseen by Antoine Dubois' prejudiced gaze, so too must we learn to look beyond the superficial. True quality speaks for itself, demanding respect not for its packaging, but for the substance within. So what does Chef Thorne's quiet resilience teach us? It's a powerful lesson in dignity and the courage to stand firm in your truth. The next time someone tries to put you in a box, to dismiss your ideas, or to question your worth based on how you look or what they think they know about you, remember Elias Thorne. Remember his steady gaze, his unwavering commitment to his craft, and the quiet authority that ultimately silenced arrogance. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for what's right. Never let anyone's prejudices or inflated egos prevent you from doing your job, from sharing your unique gift with the world. Because you never truly know who you're talking to. And more importantly, everyone deserves to be heard, regardless of who they are or what uniform they choose to wear. If you found inspiration in Elias's journey, in the satisfying taste of justice served, and in the shattering of narrow-minded assumptions, then make sure to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that celebrate intellect, resilience, and the triumph of the human spirit. We bring you narratives designed to empower, to provide catharsis, and to remind you that true strength often lies in quiet confidence. We want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked, where you came from, or what others assumed about your role? Have you experienced a moment where your quiet competence ultimately outshone someone else's loud arrogance? Perhaps you were a nurse in scrubs in your own professional field, or a chef in simple whites whose mastery was initially overlooked. Share your story in the comments below. Let your voice be heard. Your experiences are powerful, and by sharing them, we build a community that champions true worth over superficial judgment. Join us in celebrating the unsung maestros and the quiet heroes who prove, time and again, that intellect is indeed the most powerful weapon against discrimination. Your story could be the next one to inspire thousands.